Governments are not doing what they should be doing. They're not enforcing international law, of which this occupation is an absolute violation. They're not enforcing human rights conventions. They're not enforcing dozens of UN resolutions. And therefore, the people, me, the Canadian people that are coming in solidarity on the boat to Gaza, people from all over the world going to Gaza, have to get up and say, if the governments will not take responsibility, we will take responsibility, and we'll push the governments. So on the one side of Gaza, you have the Egyptian people. Coming in from the sea, you've got the international community, including Canadians. And in the center, the Palestinians, who after all these years in Gaza, in this cage, and after an onslaught a couple of years ago of the Israeli army, one of the most powerful armies in the world, have not given up. They give hope to all the peoples of the world, I think, struggling against these kinds of oppressions. So in a way, you've got, with this Gaza initiative in May, you have the coming together of these forces that I think are signaling the world that, no, the world order as it exists today of governments supporting oppressive policies against peoples is no longer valid, and we're going to stand up against it. The Palestinians have hung in there for the last, depends how you're counting. I mean, in 1948, the vast majority of Palestinians, more than 700,000, were driven out of the country. They were shattered, divided, and yet they regrouped and they hung in there. So you've got now more than 60 years. Certainly, of the 44 years of occupation, Palestinians have been under a tremendous onslaught. They're locked down, and every time they look up, they get hit over the head by a soldier. I mean, the degree of control and violence in the occupied territories is something that's very hard to express, but it's like it's happening in a prison. You have prisons that are very oppressive, but nobody knows about them because they're all closed and nobody has. That's what Israel has succeeded in doing in the occupied territories, but the Palestinians have hung in there. I think they've given hope to other oppressed peoples, certainly. And I think that's why the Palestinian issue is so huge all over the world, because these are the people resisting all the onslaught of the militarism that the Western world certainly can bring upon them with allies like Mubarak's Egypt. But I think the Palestinians have a real source of clout, and that is that they're the gatekeepers. Until they say this conflict is over, it's not over. The United States, the international community, Israel cannot impose an apartheid regime or a type of warehousing. It can't impose anything. I mean, I really have to, without sounding paternalistic in any way, to really express a sense of, I don't know, that's admiration is the wrong word, towards the Palestinian people for the fact that they've been able to withstand this and to mobilize international pressures and to really stop stop the imperialist machine of the United States and to some degree Western Europe and its allies in the Arab world and the Palestinian Authority and the Israeli government all together and stop them in their tracks. So I think this is a really inspiring example of people power with all the suffering that it entails. The Palestinian issue, I think, is like a kind of a touchstone for the Arab and Muslim worlds. I've had journalists tell me that wherever you go in the Muslim world, from Nigeria to Indonesia, you get into a political discussion and Palestine is right there. And one reason, of course, is that this is the Holy Land for Muslims as well. You're talking about the Al-Aqsa Mosque, you're talking about policies like the Judaization of Jerusalem that really endangers Muslim holy places. And you're talking about a solidarity with, the solidarity that Muslims have with each other. But beyond that, I think, you're talking about, like I've said, even though the words sound a little bit much, but you know, there's a feeling in the world of neo-colonialism, the humiliation of Islam, certainly. Which, and in a sense, if you have the clash of civilizations, from the Muslim point of view, the epicenter of all of this is Palestine. And matter of fact, that's a word that James Baker used in the Iraq Group study report, where if you remember a few years ago, Republicans and Democrats of these senior ex-officials studied, you know, what was happening in Iraq and how it's impacting American policies, and said that the Palestine issue is the epicenter. It's almost inseparable from the wider Iraqi struggle. And General Petraeus, about 6 months ago, testifying in the Senate in the United States, said the same thing. He said that, you know, we can't get to first base in the Muslim world because we're so identified, the Americans, with the Israeli occupation. But then you go beyond that as well. You know, you've got, look at the solidarity of the Latin American countries now, that unilaterally, you know, even without the Palestinians, you know, recognize the Palestinian state. Russia just reconfirmed it about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Cyprus is the first European country, but now there's about a dozen European countries poised to recognize it. I think for many people, the Palestine issue is, maybe for some of the reasons I mentioned, is like the touchstone, because it's right in our face. And if human rights and international law and so on are defeated there, the implications are tremendous. And so I think if you put that together with the fact that the Palestinians are this little grain of sand, a couple million people, you know, with no army or anything, that's managed to just halt or to stop this machine of the United States and Israel, including Europe and Canada in there as well, to try to impose a Pax Americana, if you want to put it that way. And you know, within the context of what's happening in Iraq and other places, and neo-colonialism and neoliberalism and all of that stuff put together, and here are these little Palestinians that have managed to really stop that. So I think for internal Muslim Arab reasons and also for wider reasons, the significance of the Palestinians and that struggle goes way beyond simply, and you know, you see it, I see it when I go to demonstrations all over the world. Even if it's not a Palestine issue, young people are wearing keffiyehs, you know. In other words, the Palestine thing is kind of infused. I was just last year in Seoul, South Korea, and there was a demonstration on Students' Day, which is April 19th. 50,000 young people in the central square of Seoul demonstrating for Palestine. So in other words, this obviously is linking up to other issues and other concerns, and I think it's really become more of a universal cause than merely the Palestinian issue itself.